Hi, everyone. It's Denise Brown. Our next presenter, Theresa, is going to remind us that we're always just doing our best. Theresa, take it away.
All right. Hi. Thank you everyone for being here today. And thank you, Denise. I've been so moved by all of the presentations this week. And, my meditation coach tells us that there's no right or wrong way to meditate, just better ways. And I'm not sure if the same could be said for processing grief. But I do know that sharing with and learning from all of you during this retreat has been a better way for me. So I care for my dad, and he'll be 99 in October. I lost my mom 12 years ago. And losing a family member is one of the most stressful events that we endure during our lives. And we each respond in different ways to loss. The strong emotions that surface in ourselves and others can cause conflict and more pain. And we can't control the emotions, and we can't control the actions of others. We can't change our own emotion-charged reactions that we may now regret. But we can re-examine the altercations with empathy, compassion, and forgiveness and reach a new result. So what are the emotions we feel when we know we're going to lose someone? You want to unmute and share those or put them in the chat room? Is that anticipation that we're going to lose someone? Maybe fearful, anxious, scared?
So the two words that have been repeated are fear and dread, and we're not ready.
Absolutely not ready. Yeah, just that helpless feeling, terror even. I know I felt powerless, hopeless. And Denise pointed out during the beginning, again, Twitter chat, that when we feel hopeless, we feel like hope is lost. So what are some thoughts? And I think, what was that thought, Denise, someone shared that we might have? A thought like, can I stop this? Or
I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, a thought might be, I would do anything to stop this. I can't handle this.
Oh, okay, right.
These thoughts, like we might be desperate for some control over a situation that's far outside of our control. And those thoughts are bringing about those emotions. There were three things said to me in the months that led up to Mom's passing that could have been devastating to close relationships. But with compassion, empathy, and forgiveness, our relationships not only remained intact, but became stronger. So I'm going to share what was said and how we navigated to a better place, both literally and figuratively. So I was living in France with my husband, Joe. It was 2007, and Mom had been in the hospital and then in a rehab facility. And I came to the US when she was in the hospital, and then I returned to help with the transition from rehab to home. And she faced new challenges, including she started dialysis, her medications had changed, and her short-term memory was just gone. So she couldn't remember in the morning, for example, if she took her medicines or not. And Dad just wouldn't engage in her care. He got up most mornings between 10 and 11, and Mom was an early riser, and Dad refused to accept the responsibility of helping her with her medications. So I talked with several agencies to try to get the help that she would need, and the idea of coordinating these services was overwhelming, knowing that I was so far away and Dad refused to participate. So I was distraught. And finally, I went to hospice as a last resort for advice. And the volunteer, this was just meant to be, it was at the end of her last day with hospice. And she'd retired years ago and volunteered with them for 5 years. And I was going to be the last person she would help in her formal role with Suncoast Hospice. So she listened and she respectfully replied, I know you said you're not here for hospice services, but I think we can help. And it was a lifeline for both Mom and I. It was also a lifeline for Dad, but he didn't see it that way. So when I told him that hospice was the solution for all of our problems, he said, the hell it is, get out of this house. And my flight back to France was in 3 days. I had delayed it once and needed to be on it. I moved forward without Dad's blessing. And hospice services started before I left, and it felt like a miracle had happened. So I didn't recognize my dad anymore. How could he not take care of Mom when Mom had taken care of him her whole life? She took care of his mom. And how could I like him, respect him, love him when he refused to look after her? I was angry and beyond disappointed in him. I was afraid and felt helpless. And I wasn't in a place to acknowledge his feelings, which were likely almost identical to mine. 8 months later, mom decided to stop dialysis. The port that had been damaged on her last session, and she would have to go to the hospital for the next procedure. She didn't want to go to the hospital, and I received a call at 10 p.m. and was told that she would not survive more than 3 days and that she wasn't able to speak at the moment. Joe and I were in a small town in China, 3 hours by train from Shanghai. I couldn't even get a train until morning, and it would take me 36 hours to get home from that point if all went well. The hospice nurse needed to know whether we wanted mom to go to a hospital or a hospice facility, and dad could not answer. He wanted me to make the decision. And I asked to speak to mom, knowing that she couldn't reply. And the nurse held the phone to her ear. I told mom that if she didn't want to go to the hospital, she needed to try and make her wishes known. I told her that I understood if she didn't want to go to the hospital and that I would be there as soon as I could, and understood if she couldn't wait for me. So I told her that I loved her and it was all right if she had to leave before I got there. I had to hang up because the hospice nurse wasn't listening to our conversation. And I called my mom's brother. He was the youngest of 10. And my uncle told me that if I didn't choose to have her taken to the hospital, that it was my fault that I would never see her again, and my fault that she would not see me again. And I hung up the phone with him. Joe had taken a sleeping pill because he knew he had to help me get to Shanghai and on a plane the next morning. And he was exhausted from the work he was doing, and he wouldn't have been able to manage it without sleep. So I had never felt so alone and so lost. And then suddenly, with certainty, I knew what mom wanted. And I called and told dad what I thought should be done and why. And he still deferred to me and just said, okay. So she had suffered in the hospital so many times. And I remember her saying that she never wanted to go to the hospital again. And I knew that she meant it. So mom was taken to the hospice home Woodside. And the conflict with my uncle felt surreal when I was already at a breaking point. And I needed to make this impossible decision, and the overwhelm felt unbearable. So I called my uncle back and I told him what I had decided and why. And he was so angry that I really thought that may be the last time that we would ever speak. And I was devastated. In that moment, I wasn't able to acknowledge his devastation. The 36 hours from the time I received the call, I made it to Tampa, and I went straight to Woodside. And it was nighttime. Dad, my brother, and niece thought that we would all leave for the evening, but I wasn't leaving mom's side, and I stayed with her. I talked to her all night, and at one point, when I said, I love you, she replied, I love you. And she didn't speak after that. So dad, my brother, and niece came the next morning, and mom stayed with us until I think it was about 5 p.m. And my brother was just about to leave, and the nurse told us that mom was ready to go. But hours earlier, I was sitting in her room and had a moment of panic wash over me. I had killed her. It was a certain feeling that I had killed her. And if I had said to take her to the hospital, we would have been having a conversation, not saying goodbye. The second guessing. Can anyone relate to second guessing themselves and how it feels when the stakes are so high? I see some nodding. Well, Jeff, during his presentation, said that caregiving and grief are the greatest identity thieves in the world. And this really resonated. In the early years of caring for dad, I didn't recognize myself. I didn't like myself. And in the period before mom's passing, anticipatory grief stole the identity of my dad and uncle. And it made me think I was capable of murder. We were all experiencing fear, hurt, loss, and all of the emotions that we mentioned earlier. So, I see that we were all the child here losing their heart. And Jill spoke about when we can identify the feeling, we can follow it to the thought. And this was the process, imagining what my dad and uncle were feeling that led me to a better understanding of their thoughts and the resulting actions that followed. It was my disbelief that led me to try and figure out how two normally loving and caring men could behave so out of character. I was selfish in my pursuit of empathy. So healing came through compassion, empathy, forgiveness, and travel. All four of these played a role in the healing process and were woven throughout each situation. A Buddhist definition of compassion is when love meets suffering and stays loving. We instinctively distance ourselves from suffering, and when we act with compassion, we turn towards suffering, lean into it. We face the fear and decide we can handle it. So compassion was the key that helped me understand Dad's actions or lack of actions. Empathy led me to this compassion and ultimately to forgiveness. So how deep was Dad's pain? Well, he was terrified, and he was experiencing loss that left him paralyzed with fear. He didn't say it, but he didn't believe he could do it, take care of Mom. The hospice team helped Dad engage, helped him set up systems, and helped him fulfill his role as Mom's caregiver. And what compassion looked like, it started with empathy. I thought about how frightened I would be if I were him, losing Mom, and immediately felt compassion for him and realized that he was terrified and just doing his best. What healing looked like, after Mom's funeral, it was just Dad and I in the house. Joe wouldn't join us for a few weeks. He had to fly back to France and get things sorted so that he could come to the U.S. And I booked a flight for Dad and I to Moab. Moab is in Utah. It's one of my favorite places in the U.S. And we spent a week exploring. Mom was with us the whole time. So for many reasons, this was exactly where we needed to be, and it helped us both begin to process our new reality. And I wanted that reality to include a relationship with Dad without blame or judgment. And travel worked for us. Dad took our family on a road trip across the country when I was 14. My brother was 11, and it was an unforgettable vacation. This trip, Dad and I flew, and there were no clouds, and Dad stared out the window the entire time. He was fascinated by the change in terrain. I remember thinking he could give everyone flying lessons. He was so in the moment. Where we are now, Dad will be 99 in October, and my husband and I take care of him. He's doing well, and while I inherited a stubborn gene from him, we get along pretty well. And Dad was able to visit us in France twice before we moved back to be closer to him. Les Brown, who's a motivational speaker, said, "Keep in mind that forgiving is not for others, it is for you. Forgiving is not forgetting, it's remembering without anger. It frees up your power, heals your body, mind, and spirit. Forgiveness opens up a pathway to a new place of peace where you can persist despite what has happened to you." As caregivers, we get lots of practice forgiving others, and forgiving ourselves. And I learned and grew stronger from each act of forgiveness. Small acts of forgiveness help us develop skill, and we can rewire our brains and be more prepared to undertake the more challenging forgiveness opportunities. Forgiving my uncle took time, empathy, and compassion. How deep was my uncle's pain? Well, my uncle wasn't just losing his sister. As the youngest of 10, Mom had been like a second mother to him. I remember him saying, "We can't lose her." He had lost his mom at an age younger than I was, and he knew that pain and was back in that moment and was terrified. What forgiveness looked like, I never mentioned what he said to me, to him. We moved through the funeral, and I wondered if he blamed me, if the rest of the family blamed me. Mom's siblings, my lots of cousins, I wasn't sure what had been shared. It stayed near the surface of my thoughts for years. I came to realize in that moment that he was doing the best and he had the best intentions. It took me a few years to get there. What healing looked like, a few years later, my uncle and aunt came to visit us in France. They were super travelers, but as a rule went on guided trips. And I was their guide and planned an amazing 10 days for them. And the four of us were able to go to Guernsey for a few days. It's a setting of a book that my aunt and I had both read and enjoyed. So it was 10 days of pure love and healing. We didn't discuss Mom's passing. And Joe and I are now very, very close to them. I have nothing but love, respect, and a huge place in my heart for my mom's brother. So this relationship took a bit longer to heal because we had minimal interaction after Mom's passing. And it was a gift that we were able to spend so much time together. Where we are now, my uncle's 75th birthday was Monday, and I texted him in the morning, and he called me in the evening. And I have 26 cousins, not that we compete, but I know they all didn't get a call from him. We talk a couple of times a month, and that call was a huge gift to me on his birthday. So we're very close. Amanda, who opened our retreat with a wonderful presentation, said that the love hormone oxytocin was released when we give ourselves a hug. And in that moment, when I believed and felt horror that I was the reason that Mom was dying, it was self-empathy, giving myself a hug that allowed me to create the space that I needed to listen to myself, to look back and understand what I did and why, and know that I made the best choice in the moment, the right choice in the moment. And sometimes self-empathy leads to forgiveness. In my case, it just led to clarity.
Theresa, could I just interrupt you for one moment? I'm wondering, do you have a mic that you're wearing or something? Okay.
What are you?
There's just a little bit of feedback, and I just wondered if there was a mic that you were using that maybe had moved or something.
No. Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
There's nothing moving here that I can stop.
Okay. Okay.
Is the volume okay?
And now it is. It's a little better now. So if you are okay.
Yeah, maybe that'll help. Thanks, Denise. So, how deep was my pain? In the room with Mom just a few hours before she passed, I couldn't breathe. And I went to find the counselor. I started talking and didn't stop until I realized that Mom might have died in the hospital. That's the last thing that she would have wanted. So I couldn't know what the outcome would have been, but I decided just with her wishes in mind. It wasn't until the funeral that I learned that after our conversation when I was in China, she sat up and she said, no hospital. So she heard what I had said to her and she made her wishes known. And what empathy looked like for me was to empathize with myself and understand that my decision was made hand in hand with Mom, and that as devastating as it was what she wanted, and that I was just doing my best. It was so hard. It had been 12 years. It has been 12 years, and I still get emotional when I think about Mom and how much I miss her. And I'm afraid that by the time I'll be able to look back with joy, that I will have forgotten the memories. And what healing looked like for me after returning to France, Joe and I returned to China and South Korea for 3 months. Mom raised me in a way that inspired me to love adventure, and it was a big adventure. Mom was with me every day. I talked with her and processed the new reality, life and death, and what the world would look like as we continued on this journey without her. She was the epitome of grace and had overcome horrible things that she experienced as a child, and it was her strength and her example that carried me through and led the way to maintaining these relationships with love. And where I am now, I miss Mom. Preparing for this presentation and spending this week with you has been healing. And I thought we would spend some time with questions, if that's okay, if everyone would unmute. And I'd love to hear from you. Travel is the conduit that helped us heal our relationship. And what has worked for you in healing your relationships? And if something comes to mind, a story that you'd like to share about a relationship that was challenged during the loss of a family member, I'd like to hear that also.
Theresa?
Yes.
I'm just reminded of when my grandmother, before my grandmother died, one of her home health care providers had accidentally left a hot pack on her lower leg for too long, and it had a wound that wouldn't heal, and eventually it was to the point where it needed to be either amputated or she would die of sepsis in a few days. And my mom asked her brothers what they thought, and they all told her that it was up to her. So hoping to, not watch my grandma have to go through this horrible death, she opted to let her have it amputated. And my grandma had had a stroke right after my grandpa died, and she was very confused. And every time she felt her stump, she would wonder where her leg was. And she would say out loud, "Where's my leg?" And her brothers visited us shortly after the amputation. You know, we had a family get together because my grandma was probably going to die pretty soon anyway, which was partly why it was such a difficult choice for my mom. And my grandma ended up living about 6 months after that. But so many family members berated my mom and second guessed her and told her she had made a dumb decision, or told her, "Why did you let grandma go through that horrible surgery? And look, she's feeling for her leg every day. And of course it still hurts. You know, the stump still hurt, and she had phantom pain." And my mom just took so much grief from people for, you know, she had asked what people wanted her to do, and nobody gave her any help. So she made the best decision she could. And I just kept telling her that through the whole thing. But I have so much admiration for my mom, because she never had any animosity towards her brothers. She goes, "Of course they second guess me. Of course they, you know, feel sorry for their mom. Of course they love her." And I was so amazed at the example of my mom of just not letting anybody's words make her second guess her own decision or make her feel bad. She shed some tears, but she was so emotionally strong that she was able to just still love everybody.
That's awesome, Jill. That is, what a great example she is, that love can get us to where we need to be and maintain those relationships and understand why other folks may be coming to different decisions.
Jill, that's a wonderful example of not to take things personally. So the Four Agreements, which is that great book by Don Miguel Ruiz, I think is his name. He talks about one of the agreements that we have with others in our life is not to take what they do and say personally, which helps us then not have this huge emotional response. And that's an amazing example of that. Thank you for that. I'm going to remember that.
I remember my mom, the reason the port stopped working was that a nurse in the dialysis facility just made an error. And, you know, there could have been a lot of blame surrounding that. But I knew that wasn't how mom lived either. You know, that just mistakes do happen. And there had been a lot of reasons, medical, you know, reasons that she was still alive. And, you know, so a lot of positive things happened, but a lot of mistakes happened. But, you know, just to you know, hold a blame or to have animosity for something that happened like that just wasn't, that wasn't something that my mom would have done. And so, yeah, like you, Jill, I've just gained a lot of strength from her and how she made her decisions and how she lived her life. Anyone else have an example of how they were able to heal a relationship that negatively impacted during the loss of a family member? Or something that you carry with you from a family member who you lost?
I wonder, Theresa, how your lessons learned from your mom's death impact you now as you think about what will happen during your dad's last days and then the days after his death.
Well, one thing that came about from this is that I had the conversation with Dad to understand better what his wishes were when he died, so that, you know, with Mom, it happened suddenly. Even though she was on hospice, I really didn't expect that something like this was going to happen so quickly. So I hadn't had that formal conversation with her. So I have had an opportunity to have that conversation with Dad, and he doesn't want to go to a hospital. He's made that clear, especially with COVID-19. It's an important conversation to have. And I think I won't have that that, crisis where I feel like I'm to blame, I think I'm very clear on what his wishes are. And that's been something that came about from that experience. And something else I'll share is that hospice had never been through anything like this before. So when I was, 36 hours, I was more than 36 hours away. They hadn't ever had a family member try to get to the, the side of the person who was passing, and have this type of decision to make, is what they told me. And I also hadn't been in communication with them and asking them direct questions. I guess they weren't, reaching out to me and sharing, and I wasn't reaching out to them and asking questions. So mom might have been declining and deteriorating. I was talking to mom and talking to dad, and everything sounded fine because they wanted me to think everything was fine. But there might have been a different reality had I talked to the hospice nurse. And for mom to say that she wanted to stop dialysis, there was, I believe there was more going on. She just wasn't feeling strong enough. Not going to the hospital was part of it, but there was probably more going on that I wasn't aware of, and I'll never know. And that's just a lesson for others, is that, if you're at a distance and hospice is involved, reach out to the folks and ask the questions. It's not necessarily their responsibility to reach out to you and share what's going on. It's not a regret, just something, that I think is a lesson for other folks. And now that I'm here with dad, I know that won't be an issue. I'm seeing firsthand every day, how he's doing, and I'll see the progression, hopefully, as long as I'm not in denial, that he's declining. Deborah?
I think one of the hardest things that I had to do was acknowledge that my dad was just exhausted. We lost him to congestive heart failure, and he had a year of just total and complete exhaustion. And I wasn't ready to let him go, but he was ready to go. And honoring that is what gives me, I can deal with his death, because I was able to honor that. We were fortunate in that, we went into the hospital second time when we lost him when he was in the hospital, and he chose not to come home on hospice. And I know he chose it because my mom couldn't have dealt with him dying in their home. And he had a defibrillator. And I was actually driving home to get my hair cut, because I had literally moved back in with him, when his cardiologist called and said, "Your dad's decided to turn the defibrillator off." And I had to respect that, because we knew that was it. It was a matter of time. And he was wonderful in terms of saying, I know your brother and sister have to get here. We'll wait until tomorrow. So we were with him. And the honor of being with him when he passed, and knowing that we honored his wish to make that choice the same way your mom did, for me, made all the difference in the world. It really, really did.
Yeah, that's really special. And I think it's important to know that it's, like I told mom, if you don't want to say, or if you're not able to say, that's okay. So I think you're right. Just knowing that it worked out in a way that was very meaningful for you is fantastic, but it would have also been okay had I not, gotten home in time. I would have completely understood. But it was very special to be there.
This is Barry. Can I come in and tell my story? It's kind of a little off, but on the same vein. My mother lived in Florida. I live in Illinois. My brother lives in New York, and that's the extent of the family. She was independent. She was doing fine. I was officially the power of attorney for healthcare. Two stories that I've learned that I just want to kind of share. The first one was when she started, deteriorating and getting sick at the end. I realized very quickly that I'm 50 years old. I did not know this octogenarian. She was my mother, but I visit 2 or 3 times a year. Her friends knew her more than her family did, because all they do is drive each other to different doctor's appointments. And when someone is suffering, they tell each other, "Oh, I don't want to be like that." So even though I officially had the power of attorney, what I really did was called all her friends together and kind of learned about my mother as that human being at that point in time as to what she really wanted. And I learned a hell of a lot. It's not what I thought she wanted when I knew her, from many years ago. The part about the hospice, though, so she's in the hospital, and this kind of the very end. She's in a lot of pain, and my brother and I are down there, and I have the power of attorney, and she's in pain, but she's talking, and I'm an attorney, so I help people with the power of attorney for healthcare, and the doctor's talking to me and my brother like my mother's not even in the room, talking about, well, if she goes to hospice, it's this, and if she goes to that. And I kept trying to look at my mother's eyes and hoping that the doctor would follow me, and he didn't. And at some point, I just yelled at him. I said, she's still conscious, and she's hearing every word. Can you talk to her, please? And I saw that my mother appreciated, because we were just talking over her. She was in a lot of pain, but I said, Mom, did you hear the conversation? She's like, yeah. Do you want to go to the hospice and just forget about make you feel comfortable and not treat your ailments? She said, and that was all that my brother and I needed to hear. And truthfully, the next 8 days of her life were the best she had in 3 or 4 years. She was out of pain. Yeah, the underlying condition made her, pass away 8 days later, but she was out of pain. She was able to have conversations with us. But the point is, that still always bothers me that, I love that you, Theresa, did what your mother wanted you to do. That's the whole purpose of the surrogate decision making. But we also have to train, whether it's at the hospice or at the hospital or wherever, that as long as the patient can still make some decision, we as the surrogates don't have to, we're there to support their decision. We're not there to make the decision on them. So I just, to kind of throw those two stories, but it's also the beginning part that, a lot, when it's a parent, if you're caring for your spouse, it's one thing, them, they're your best friends. But when you're caring for a parent, I have my own life that was thousands of miles away, and she had a great group of friends. Why would I not include them? They're more part of her life than I am, truthfully. And I think as a child, you have to accept that also, and kind of bring who has she really talked about if I was in third stage cancer like this friend was, this is what I would want. She didn't never talk to me about that, but she talked to a friend. So just throwing it out there, just to throw it out there.
Yeah, that's awesome, Barry. Can you share with us something that you learned about your mom when you started to have those conversations with her? Because I love that you did that.
There was a lot of animosity between her and my brother and his wife, and I think we were able to kind of, because my brother and I were down there at the same time, and kind of, I had to get back to work, and my brother kind of went back, flew down, and he was there when she physically passed away. But the fact that my brother and I and her were able to have a conversation, I don't know that I learned anything, but I think she had peace of mind, as, in the last one, what is peace of mind? I think she felt it because the relationship between me and my brother in front of her. Of course, 3 days on top of each other, we started fighting, and, but that was normal, but it was just kind of, so but I don't know that I learned anything that I didn't know about her, but I'm so happy she made the decision that she wanted to go into the hospice, because she was conscious. Yes, she was on morphine, and yes, she was in a lot of pain. And I probably would have made the decision, because I saw how much pain she was in, and I knew that the hospice, would relieve the pain. But I'm just so glad that, not that I didn't make that decision, but I was there to witness her. And I think she respected that I fought for her in front of the doctor, because he was just treating her like she's the irrelevant thing in the room. I'm talking to you and your brother. And I don't know that he was doing consciously. I'm just saying, I think that's something else that we have to educate medical practitioners that caregiving there's a reason for a surrogate decision maker, but there's also what does the human being want if they could make any communication, and then we're there to support their decisions, not to interject.
Yeah, Barry, and you know better than anyone, being an attorney, that's exactly why that healthcare POA is in place, is in case they are not able to make their own decisions, that we understand what their decisions are, and that we make sure that they're carried through. But if that person is able to speak and make their decisions, that's the most important person we want to hear from. And yeah, when mom, it helped me when I heard after the fact that she had set up and said no hospital, because in the moment I was doing what I thought was best for her, because I knew that it wasn't my decision to make, and it wasn't dad's decision to make, it wasn't my uncle's decision to make, it was mom's decision to make. And if she couldn't make it, then we had to do the best we could to honor what she would want. So yeah, I think you're right. The more that we can spread that message to healthcare professionals, I think that, honoring, Carrie's wishes is just really, really important. Who else would like to share a story of how they healed a relationship after the loss of a family member?
Hey, Theresa, it's Danelle. I don't have a story that I want to share right now, but I just wanted to comment that it feels like your mom was trying to protect you, and the realization for you that it wasn't possible to protect her from death gave that false sense of blame. And it's just so much harder when you have a caring heart. And you have a beautiful, caring heart.
Oh, you're sweet, Danelle. Yeah, she was, in her way, was always trying to protect me, but also just fly and be free was the way she raised me. Yeah, she had a big heart. So, yeah, and it's when you're in that moment of grief and trying to process everything and overwhelmed, and I'm talking about the moment that I was next to her bed, just hours before she passed. Yeah, your mind just stops working. And starts imagining things, and that's what happened. And the thought processes are just convoluted. And I still have moments. I still have moments where I go back and I have to remind myself, go kind of to the same thing, that self-empathy, and talk myself through it, because and I'm confident that it was the right thing to do, but I still have moments where I second guess myself, and in just in a quick second I can bring myself back to that was definitely the right thing to do. It was her wishes. Yeah. Joan, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was gonna share a story. After my mom passed away, so I had 4 older brothers, and everything was kind of on me. And let's just say our family's kind of like the dysfunctional family Olympics a little bit, right? And, the one brother that I thought would have had my back through it all is the one brother who sent me the vicious scree of an email because he didn't like how I was handling something. And it took me back, and I responded, but I never hit send. And that was probably one of my smarter decisions, because I needed to get that response out. But if I had hit send, it would have turned into a war, just because I know his personality. And I don't even know if he's aware of how hurtful what he did was, because that's the way he is. But, it took some time, but I think we're back where we were. And it was a good lesson of don't hit send till the next day. Think about it overnight.
Yeah. So you say you're back to where you were. So do you feel like you were able to heal the hurt?
Yeah, maybe not where we were. Maybe a little further, better. Just because over time, I've done so much work on myself that I can really look back and see, yeah, you know, he was lashing out and I happened to be the convenient target.
Yeah, that's awesome, Joan. Yeah, that's it in the moment. Our perspective, it's so hard. Like I said, all the emotions that my dad was feeling, that my uncle was feeling, I was feeling the same thing, but I couldn't see that they were feeling the almost identical emotions, and that's where their words and their actions were coming from.
Right.
Yeah.
Joan, could I ask you a question?
Sure.
So you didn't hit send, but I just wonder, did your brother ever bring up the message that he sent?
Nope.
So no conversation ever occurred about it?
Nothing.
Okay.
No, about the only one who, other than all of you, who knows that ever got sent was my husband. I didn't want my kids to know because that's their uncle. Right. And I didn't bring it up with his wife because I didn't want to kind of put her in the middle. So I just kind of dumped on my husband, like always. And other than that, kept my own counsel.
You know, don't you think, I know a lot of times we're maybe recommended to go have this conversation with a person who maybe hurt us, to, you know, share it with them and hear what they have to say. But like you, in both cases, I did not go back to my dad and expect him to explain. I tried to get there on my own, and that was the right thing to do, and with my uncle as well. For those years after, I felt like at some point we were going to have this conversation where he blamed me and I told him how awful he was for having said that. And that, by the time I got to the point that I had that empathy and felt the compassion, that was the last thing I wanted to do, was bring that up.
Yeah.
I was holding on to the idea that he was still holding some animosity toward me. The 10 days in France proved that wasn't the case. He had nothing but love, and my aunt nothing but love for us. And I can see, Joan, where like you were able to get to, like you say, a better place without ever having that confrontation. And it sometimes it's needed, maybe, but a lot of times it's not.
I just didn't see an upside to doing it.
Yeah.
You know, at that point, I had known him for 40 years. Like, I could tell there would not have been an upside.
That's awesome insight.
Theresa, this is Tony. I wanted to say how much I appreciate everybody sharing their story. It is so very different from mine because I come from an only child perspective. As far as interacting with family, there were very few people even checking in with me from mom's side of the family or dad's side to see how mom was doing. We're in Florida. Most of our relatives are in Illinois. I was pretty much the only one that knew everything that was going on. And I took care of my mom for 14 years. And she almost died several times. And she almost made it to her 100th birthday. I really had, because she was able to make decisions, have conversations, it were other things that were wrong with her, health, but mentally she was fun to be with. And, getting to know her again, those 14 years I took care of her, was such a blessing. And, Barry mentioned you don't know these people anymore. They're, your memories are of childhood or an earlier time in your life. And although I did stay connected with mom through phone calls over my many moves, I felt like I did know her, but it was a profound experience learning more about her life and asking her about her life. I didn't have any idea what the grieving process was going to be like. And you asked Theresa, how did I get through it? Well, I certainly wasn't unexpected when it happened, but I did experience intense exhaustion, certainly lost my purpose in life after her being my sole focus of attention. And like I said, there was really no family around to talk to, which is probably sounds very strange to you, but you know, I'm thinking now it could have been a positive because there was nobody to be upset with how I handled things. How I handled the first couple of months was with a bag of double stuffed Oreo cookies and binge watching TV. And a friend noticed that really wasn't working for me. But I really I just didn't have any strength. And he knew me for a long time, knew my mom, and said, "You are a teacher, you are an educator, you have learned so much through 14 years, you should find a way to share it with people." And he really lit a candle under me, probably a rocket ship. I mean, I just got so inspired through our conversations and through the potential he saw in me. And it wasn't until, 10 months later that I found Denise's Certified Caregiving Consultant Program. But that has just so revived my spirit. And being able to engage with all of you and, you know, so many conferences, just getting to know everybody, you know, keeps inspiring me. So I didn't really tell you much about Mom's death, but it was a beautiful experience, and I was there a couple hours before she passed. It was very positive, and one of the things, either Gina or Theresa, you showed a slide about memory. It had the wheel with memories on it, and I just have so many photographs. I have some videos of her. Her 95th birthday party was a huge celebration with about 100 people there. And my friend who encouraged me to teach, to do something with this information, while you were talking, Theresa, he sent me a photo of me and him and my mom when she gave a speech at my Toastmaster Club. I posted it on the Certified Caregiving Consultant page with a little note, but that was just so weird that during our conversation, he found this photo and he said, "I thought you'd like seeing this again." And that was from 2017. But I think it takes good friends. I think it takes a support group. And what I was missing a lot during caregiving was that support group and more involvement with friends. And it was my fault that I didn't pick up the phone more. So I've definitely learned that. And
I just want to say that Theresa just has 3 minutes left. So
okay,
I want to throw it back to Theresa so she can wrap it up for us.
Okay. So thanks for asking that question, Theresa.
Oh, no, thank you, Tony. Oh, that's awesome that you received that picture too. That's something that I think about with Dad. I didn't get that chance with Mom. An adult, relationship, so to speak. And with Dad, I'm getting that in spades. So that's really awesome to, just have that opportunity. So yeah, I would just say that in that moment, that conflict we feel, that hurt, that if we can empathize and just realize that the person we're having that conflict with is likely having the same exact emotions that we are feeling. And if we can hold off on that reaction and just take some time, give ourselves some space to think about what they're going through, then we can probably get to a better place, like Joan said, even a stronger place, because in doing that, we are working on ourselves. And it helps us make those relationships even stronger. So I want to thank you all for being here. And thanks again, Denise. And thank you all for participating.
Thank you so much, Theresa. Thanks, everybody, so much for being here. We're going to take a break and resume in a few hours. Thanks again, Theresa. It was great.